Welcome to The Marvelous Gospel, a podcast where we examine our favorite movies from a biblical, theological, and redemptive perspective. Just kidding. All right, this is the East Side movie night at Epikos Church, and we just watched Marvel's Black Panther. Now, before we depart for this evening, I wanted to take some time to reflect on this film that we just watched. I invited some of my friends here to come and chat about it with me today. So I'm Jacob Michalski, campus pastor here at the Eastside campus, and I'd just like to introduce you to our panel quickly. To my right, we have Tommy Hutchinson and Frank Gill. I almost called you Tommy and Frank Hutchinson. That would have been embarrassing. But
so many things.
So many things. And then we also have our very own small group leaders from the Eastside campus, Eric and Shanan Smith. Let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. Before we dive into our in-depth theological conversation, I just want to give us an opportunity and a safe place to nerd out here for a little bit. So we're going to go down the line here, and I want you to just introduce yourself, how you heard about this movie night and to be a part of this, your relationship, I guess, with Epikos, and also share just the favorite part that you saw from this Black Panther movie. So we'll start right away to our person on the right.
Yeah, so Frank and I do this podcast, which if you're listening online and you say, this sounds different, it does. This is not normal for us. So we wanted to make sure we're recording this so you can be a part of this in case you missed the movie night. But Frank and I have always talked about wanting to do a live one of these, partially because we have no idea who's listening. And so actually seeing people to be able to be like, oh, cool, you listen, and also go, oh, you listen. This isn't just Frank and I in a room talking via webcam. There are people who pay attention to us, so we got to make sure at least I need to make sure that what I'm saying isn't heresy, is what I'm realizing. But no, honestly, with this movie, this one, there's a lot of things I could talk about, and we could nerd out on different things. But one of the big things for me, I don't know if you caught the music and how each character has kind of their own theme. This is super nerdy, like getting very, very nerdy. We're just going there, right? But T'Challa is much more your very traditional African drum sound. And then when you get to Killmonger, his is this like R&B, lots of low-end music. But I don't know, did you catch at the very end when the two of them are standing on the cliff what the music sounds like? It's all of it together. And so there's this beautiful moment where both of their sounds come together, and it's as if they figured out. And then at the end, the after credit scene actually plays into both of those sounds together. We have a little more of that R&B feel with it. It's just this really cool way where even the music itself is telling the story as you're going through. And actually, this comes from one of the podcasts that Frank and I like to listen to a lot, where they talk about the music. You don't realize how much that plays into what they're doing until you really start to focus on it. So that for me is a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff I could nerd out on, but that one's really fun.
That was really nerdy. That was very nerdy.
Hey, you told me to nerd out, man. I'm just going for it.
Safe place.
This is like my dream right now. I'm in my church watching a Marvel movie, talking about Marvel and theology. This is like the greatest day ever. Speaking of the music, there was a scene with the door Mirage, and it's like the doo-doo, like it's like really high-pitched noises. And then in She-Hulk, when they were like, we don't have any more money for the FX team, they're working on another movie, and it's doo-doo, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so dope.
That was a big spoiler.
That's not a big spoiler, but it's a spoiler. Okay, whatever. The only thing I'll say is, as I was watching this movie, I was remembering why I looked at my rankings. I keep the rankings of all the Marvel movies in order. Every time I watch a Marvel movie to see if it moves up or down. Black Panther is number 5 in my list of all the Marvel movies. And right before it is Thor Ragnarok, which is an excellent film. And I was like watching this, I was like, man, should this bump up like Thor Ragnarok? This is such a good movie. The only thing I'll say right now in terms of because I've already nerded about this movie plenty of times. This is one of the few Marvel movies where every action scene is like epic. Like there's no wasted action scenes. Like every action scene is so good. The Dora Milaje is good. M'Baku is like the dopest. I have his action figure back there because he's just like a big brute of a dude, and it's so good. I think the one thing I'll say, and maybe this is already tying into the faith stuff, is there's a meme that went around, I think last Easter or the Easter before, where they took the scene of T'Challa coming back after they got the herb, and he took down the plane, and he comes from the rubble, and he's just standing there, and he tells Killmonger and everybody, he says, "As you can see, I am not dead." And they were like, "This is Jesus telling the Pharisees, as you can see, I am not dead." And I was like, yes, this is the gospel, dude. This is so good. I am so geeked out right now. It might be the Coke, but it's so good. And my
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
We're not
Oh my
sponsored by
goodness.
that, but we're
Oh
in
my
church. We
goodness.
need to clarify, please.
Anyways, yeah.
So my name's Shanan, for those of you who I haven't gotten a chance to meet. I run a Bible study with my husband, small group with Epikos here at Eastside. It's really hard to narrow down what my favorite is. You know, I'm going over my notes that I took when I watched the movie, and then again when we watched it this time. It's really hard to say what my favorite moment in the movie is, because I love it as a whole. I love the cultural representation, the fact they really went out of their way to pick actors and actresses to represent the culture well. They did their research. I love seeing strong female characters working alongside strong men. I think that's something that it's either one or the other, and I love that they get to come together and they are needed to work together. And I think that's a perfect example of brothers and sisters in Christ. We need each other to work together. We're stronger together. So I really love that. But on a more personal note, I really love Chadwick Boseman and them choosing him, especially knowing his own personal struggles that he had dealing with cancer, and how he chose to bear it selflessly. And I was reminded in that when he was picking out his armor with the necklace, just when we watched it this time, he selected the more humble looking one. It's better to go unnoticed. And it just made me think so strongly of what he battled personally with cancer, and it made his words so much more powerful after the fact. So it's it's a lot, but
I don't know how anybody goes after that to talk about their favorite.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
that,
make it
that was Thor's
Sorry,
I
babe.
should have gone before you.
that was Thor's hammer dropping on all of us right there.
I mean, I do agree, watching this movie in light of Chadwick Boseman's passing, I mean, it hurts more, because he was such a great representation of Black Panther. Eric, why don't you go next?
Yeah. Again, my name is Eric. Like Shanan said, we are small group leaders. We've been going to Epikos for a couple of years, and we've been small group leaders for almost a couple of years. So it's really awesome. And if you are not a small group leader, you should do it. I don't know who in here is not one,
We
but
did not
you should
pay
go
him
for
to
it.
say that.
Do it.
But man, there's so many things about this movie that I love. I have not, before this week, I haven't watched this movie in a really long time. But there's just so many things. And I think my favorite moments from this movie is whenever T'Challa goes to talk back with his father. You can just see the connection there, and just the wisdom that pours out from his father. And I think the best part is when he goes back the second time, and he really just goes against the grain of what the generations before him have done, and he just makes the decision to say hey, what you guys have been doing, I get it, but it's not right. And I feel it's so powerful when he says no more. He realizes we can be doing so much more. And that just is so powerful, and I might bring up that point a little bit more later, but that was just really powerful to me.
Something Shan said that I thought was true. She talked about how it was very strong female characters, and I am one of the few people who like Captain Marvel as a movie, and I thought Miss Marvel was great. And Black Widow was all right. All these movies that have come out with the strong female characters were okay. I thought the Dora Milaje, every single time they're on the scene, I'm not giving them any kind of caveats. Well, it's okay, the CGI, they're every time the Dora Milaje shows up, it's be terrified of the Dora Milaje. They are strong and awesome. And even in the Falcon and Winter Soldier, the Dora Milaje goes wherever Dora Milaje wants to go. They are such, they're so good. It gets me psyched. All right, that's it.
Awesome. Well, let's just try jumping into some theological. Oh man, that was a word mumbling through. Okay, let's try jumping into some theological themes. That was better that time. Okay, I'm going to let Eric and Shannon. I'm just going to let you steer our conversation. Is there one theme in particular that you'd like to just have us, have a conversation about here at this point?
Yeah. I think, the big overarching theme of this movie is you have these two different worldviews of what Wakanda should be in the world. You have a worldview of no, we should use what we have for power and, just overpowering everybody who's ever hurt us. And then you have the other end where they say, well, we should use it for good to help those in need. And obviously that brings up, and I think that you guys talked about in your podcast, but the city on a hill metaphor, right? This really speaks to us as Christians, is we have this power, right? We have this thing that is living inside of us. Are we going to choose to keep it silent or keep it dormant, or are we going to use that to go out and help others who really need that? And to me, it's clear, what we should be doing, right? So obviously that theme is very big in this film.
Yeah, and I think there's I would add a third category. I think there was three of them. I think there was the one where it's the city on a hill. You had this Nakia who wanted to take and take with love and mercy, I think was the way she was thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Then you had Killmonger who, out of his anger and hatred for the world, that's what he wanted to unite everything with. And I actually think there was a third one, which was pacifism. Mm-hmm. Total pacifist. In a non-good way. A complete, we're not going to do anything and we're just going to stay hidden. Which is the exact opposite of the city on the hill metaphor, which is you have all three of these things going at each other, and at the end they decide actually they choose Nakia's way, right? Mm-hmm. What is the best way for us to do this? It's out of grace, out of mercy, out of love. We have been blessed to then turn to be a blessing to others. And so I almost think that there's actually three different roads that they're trying to fight between, which is ironic that the pacifist wants to fight between that. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if we talked about this in the podcast, but Pastor Anthony was talking to us about this once, and he said that, so I think that I'm going to take it from a political point, which is I think what the movie was doing, and then taking it to our faith, is that they were saying that Killmonger and T'Challa is Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. So Martin Luther King's standpoint is let's work with people, let's work with white brothers who want to help us and try to reform and try to change what's happening. And you have Malcolm X, who is by any means necessary, even if it's militant, let's try to get what we need. And that was Killmonger, right? And I think the word maybe, what was the word? Pacifist. I would use more of a word of preservationist. Yeah. He's trying to preserve what's going on. And so you also have, I think here, is a story of what is America going to be? Is America going to be a country of we have these resources, we have this stuff, and help the nation? There was a line where the guy from Get Out, I forgot his name. I can't think of his name in the movie.
The rhino trainer.
The rhino guy, the border guy. Yeah. He said, if you bring in refugees, we bring refugee problems. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that sounds like something that's happening in our world right now, right? And so there's this preservationist attitude where it's let's just keep to ourselves and protect ourselves and not worry about the outsiders. So in Christianity, what you see is kind of two different worlds. You see a Presbyterian view, which is let's be missional and care for folks and start missionary groups to go and reach people and build hospitals and all this stuff. And then you have more of what has been traditionally viewed as a Baptistic view, which is let's become insular. Let's create Christian institutions. Let's create schools. Let's create things for ourselves. Let's have big, giant churches where we have the sports camps and the Christian school and everything here so we don't get tainted by the world, right? And so you have those two views very much even within Christianity. And I think what you're saying, what you're saying is so true, is there has to be this middle ground, which I think is what Nakia is trying to say is we can still be very much who we are as Wakanda, mm-hmm. but also care for the needs of the world, which is very much what Jesus is saying is there is a sense that we have to preserve ourselves from the world and not be tainted by the world. So it's mm-hmm. Don't be in the world but not of the world. But at the same time, we have the old evangelistic tool is hey, if you had $1 billion, would you keep it to yourself or would you share it with others, right? And it's like, we would, like, I mean, probably some of the selfish were like, I'll keep it for myself. But like, if you had a way for other people to get $1 billion as well, would you share it? And that's the kind of the metaphor for the gospel, right? So it's like, we don't be so afraid of this world, but be able to get in the world, but don't be affected by the world.
Well, and even the irony at the very end in the after credit scene when they're in like the UN or something like that, and they're like, "What can farmers give to us?" And everyone laughs. And there's the agent in the back, which I love that actor, by the way. Can we should fanboy like Sherlock?
Sure.
I'm just waiting for him and Doctor Strange to interact because then you got the the Cumberbatch and him from like. There's so many. You got something you're wanting to jump on there, Shanan?
Oh no, I love him. He's like, I also love him a lot. It made me happy that of all the white men they could have picked, they picked him.
But I was going to say at the very end, this irony though of the UN looking and saying, "What can farmers give us?" Which in a lot of ways is what people say, "What can Jesus bring?" And there's this laughing off type attitude when you're like, and I love T'Challa's little smirk, like if only you knew.
Right.
If only you knew, and then you get into these coming movies after this, where all of a sudden the whole world has changed. Like the way they're interacting, even you start to see now these different suits being created by there, and it's all because one person took the blessing and brought that back out. Mm-hmm. And so there's just this, in that little smirk that T'Challa had in that after credit scene, you're like, but when you guys understand, when you taste and see that it is good, I don't know, there's something about that city on a hill metaphor that's so good, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the role is of us as Christians? This goes for both of you guys, I guess. What's the role for like both of us as Christians of being that in the world, not of the world? I mean, I think your podcast is an example of that. The Marvelous Gospel is taking these movies that are, I mean, they're not made with a framework of Jesus behind them at all, but you're allowing to take these movies, these films, look at them through a redemptive perspective and lens, and you're teaching people how to critically watch media and not just passively consume it and allow it to form us and twist us and shape us and mold us. You're allowing people to look critically at media. I think that's just one example of how we can be a city on the hill, being in the world but not of the world. But do you guys have any other examples that you can think of that might?
So what's the big holiday happening in 7 days or 8 days from now? What's the big holiday? Halloween, right? And Christians love freaking out about Halloween. We love to be like, no, absolutely not. Turn the porch light off. Keep those heathens away, right? Everyone gets really weird about Halloween. But like Halloween is like the one time of year where it's not weird to go to your neighbor's house, right?
And not weird for your neighbors to come to your house.
Yeah.
Like they're not even going to them. It's them coming to you.
And it's like such an opportunity, to at minimum, build relational bridges with your neighbors. And what better way, I've learned this in youth ministry. If you can show other people that you are showing goodwill towards their children, you'll get the parents, right? And I think that I think Halloween, you don't have to get demonic on Halloween. You could just have the big candy bars on your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? You can be not a jerk to people and yeah, sure. But I think there's ways to be missional in your own community in this. I also think that there's just a general sense of you could be good to others even if it doesn't end up them necessarily coming to Christ, but that goodwill can leave an impression for the seed of the gospel to grow. So I think of I just had a dinner conversation with a bunch of foster parents, and think about the impact those foster parents are not only making in that child who for whatever reason being pulled by the state from their parents, but the impact they could have on those parents who are maybe in a very difficult place. I think fostering. I think anytime, it doesn't have to be super churchy. If you have a natural gifting or skill set that you can benefit others in the name of Christ, that is a good thing. And I think so often as Christians, we want to keep it insular. How can I use my gift and talents only for the other Christians and not think about just the general goodwill of others? And I think, Christian history shows us the reason why all these hospitals are Saint something or another is because Christians said, we believe in a God who heals. God has given us science and medical advances to heal, and therefore let's create hospitals where there are no hospitals. And that's why so many hospitals were created by Catholics or Baptist or Christian charities to to help care for others.
Yeah, it really brings on the theme of exile throughout the Old Testament. Like you see this theme. I believe it's in Daniel that Yahweh God commands his people who are taken in exile by Babylon, like a very hostile, terrible nation. And he says, while you're in exile and while you're there, I want you to build gardens, build cities, build a home.
Seek
and
the welfare of the city.
Yeah, seek the welfare of the city, like pour into society and then contribute to that society for the sake of my name, for the sake of Yahweh's name. Do you want to add anything, Eric and Shannon?
Oh, I think Tommy had something.
Tommy looks like you're going to talk.
I can always talk. That's my problem. My problem isn't, is there something to say? I think, I might take a slight turn. You asked me how to be in the world and not of it. I think part of it is watching a movie like this and also saying that everything in it is not right. And what I mean by that is like, this is not scripture. Mm-hmm. This is not, even though there are good things and we're pulling out theological concepts, this is truly a live podcast. We just had a phone go off in the middle of it. This is great. I would say just when we watch things, we have to be careful though, that we don't say that and go, yes, that's truth. But rather being in the world means, am I engaging with culture? Am I engaging with people? Am I understanding, even trying to empathize their worldview? Just in terms of understanding, how did they get there? What is their thought process? What got them there? Or am I just stiff-arming it? But just because I'm empathizing with someone doesn't mean that and I mean in terms of like a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness, others. Am I studying what they believe so that when I engage with them, I can actually say, okay, is this how you got there? But that's in the world. Of the world would be like, now I'm going to adopt and say what that is true.
Like if you start like adopting ancestral worship, like in this movie.
For sure.
Like, and what's funny is I didn't notice it. This is the only time I've noticed this. They in the way we would talk about taking the Lord's name in vain, they took Bas, is that the name of their
Bas,
god?
yeah.
Bas, like
too.
the goddess Bas or whatever. They kept saying like, for Bas' sake, or Bas please. Like they would take their god's name in vain. But like that's an example of like ancestral worship, which comes up a lot in Marvel movies, is something that's not biblical or true, but it actually, we see that in all over the world.
Well, and I think we've talked about this in the podcast. There's an evangelistic way that some people in Eastern countries where you're dealing in places, or in African where you're dealing with more ancestor worship, they'll actually talk about Jesus as the proto-ancestor. Or Jesus as the first ancestor. So that's what I kind of, so there's this part of like, there are times where I think you can redeem or go into a culture and actually speak their language.
Firstborn of all creation?
I'm not saying you're wrong. It's Colossians 1:15.
Follow our Colossians series.
There's a great sermon on that happened like 3 weeks ago. Not to toot somebody's horn, but but I do think that is something that's in that this idea of actually, I've heard missionaries talk about this. The Varsity Boys have actually dealt with this. We've talked about them in the podcast before. Jeff Varsity has actually wrestled with. I've talked with him just a couple weeks about this. About will they use and talk about, they were in a country that ancestor worship was very popular. So are they going to talk about Jesus as the first, now as the first ancestor? That may not be something we talk about. But if we understand that that's what the culture is, are we willing to meet them on their turf in order to say, hey, how does Jesus fit here? And not in a like, I need to massage the gospel to fit. The beautiful part about the gospel is it fits anywhere. It already does. But I think are we able to understand that culture to be in it enough, but yet still stand out? Holy means to be set apart, right? We're going to be weird. We're going to be different. But are we willing to be that standout in it to show people and point them to Christ with his love, mercy, compassion, slow to anger, so on and so forth?
Yeah. You want to say anything?
I'm just like taking this all in, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it's on here the mention of T'Challa as kind of like a Christ figure or a Messiah figure, correct? What did you guys think about the contrast where, I mean, T'Challa is coming in as this new regime, right? And he's challenging the way that the past kings have done things. I thought that was like pretty interesting.
You're such a small group leader that you turned the conversation back with a question. It's such a great job. You have no idea.
Jacob was hosting this. He's a great small group leader. Adam, give him a raise. Anyways, Adam's not even here. I'm just pretending. Hey, Adam. You know what's funny is like I was thinking about when I was thinking about that question of like T'Challa as a Christ figure in this movie. Obviously, any movie where there's a Christ figure, and by the way, a lot of movies like have a Christ figure in that movie.
What do you mean by that, Christ figure?
Was it C.S. Lewis? Someone was like saying, I forgot who I heard this from, but like every good story, every good redemption story is just copying the gospel. It's just copying what Christ did in his story of taking on, sacrificing for others, and then resurrecting. Like that story we see a lot of times in different movies. One, I've shared this often. It's like the first time I ever realized a Christ figure in the movie is when I was crying while I was watching Eagle Eye, which is Shia LaBeouf. Have you guys seen that movie? Like, this is
not a crying movie.
Throwback.
I know.
Marley and Me, that's one thing, but Eagle Eye.
Everyone cries Marley and Me. No. In Eagle Eye, there's a scene, this is a spoiler alert, but it's like what, 20-year-old movie? I don't know.
You had your chance.
There's like, basically he was like, the government was trying to like sabotage him or something like that. But anyways, there's a scene at the end where he takes a bullet for the very people who were trying to like, I don't know, get him in jail or kill him or whatever. And I remember like, that's what Jesus did for me. Like he took a bullet for his own enemies, you know what I'm saying? And like you start seeing that, and I mean, almost every Marvel movie has a Christ figure typically in it. But
in order to be a Christ figure, there has to be a level of like salvation, of saving, but there also has to be, there's a level of self-sacrifice that takes place, right?
Yeah.
Is there any other attributes, do you think, that are those two main ones?
Redemption, sacrificing for the sake of others. I mean, we see this, I mean, like Captain America diving the ship into the ocean, T'Challa dying in the scene they're resurrecting, and even wanting to save Killmonger's life at the end. Like this is all, a lot of these are examples of like figures that look like Christ. But when I think about what you're saying is like, in this movie in particular, you have two examples of how Israel expected their Messiah to be. You have like the old Wakanda, who is just kind of like Israel saying like, let's keep this for ourselves. And even after Christ's death and resurrected, you see some of the false teachings wanting to keep the Gentiles out of it, right? And so you have Jesus saying, no, this isn't just for Israel, this is for the whole world, and that rubbing people the wrong way. Then you have Killmonger saying, let's overturn the system, which is exactly what some of his own disciples thought, but some of the Pharisees were like, the Messiah is going to be a warrior king that's going to take over everything, because there are some prophecies that talk about like the nation of Israel like overcoming because God's going to overturn other governments. And what you see, what I think, and this could be, and the key word for the podcast is we sometimes take liberties and stretch things or whatever. There's other stretches. But what you see is Jesus taking like a third way. Like Jesus did take a third way. The Black Panther, T'Challa taking a third way.
You asked if the Black Panther was Messiah. I think he gave you his answer right there.
There you go.
T'Challa taking a third way where he's like not going to be so insular, but he's not going to be this like warmonger, if you will.
Well, and I wanted to add to that really quick. When T'Challa's father was talking to him, and I just cleared all my notes. That's great. Well, we'll do this from memory. Help me. His father was talking to him, telling him, you have a good heart, you're a good man. It's hard for a good man to be king. And I think it's in contrast to his father, because his father decided to omit part of the truth. I just think, with what the Israelites were wanting for their king, they didn't want a good man. They wanted deliverance. They wanted that, a chariot and a horse and, ready for battle and to fight. And like T'Challa didn't like necessarily want that. It was like violence was his like last resort. Like he didn't want to kill Killmonger until the very end. And it was more out of realizing he had to do this for his people and for Killmonger's own good. So I think that's very reflective of him having a good heart, but like, the character of Jesus, of being humble and only doing what was necessary when he had to.
And how often are we like T'Chaka, where like when we're, T'Chaka, the father,
T'Chaka.
in this situation, how often are we like this, where we're confronted with a situation and we choose to omit the teachings of Scripture because we want to fit things. I was listening to this podcast on the way here, and it was about like this Christian organization that says Jesus turned a cheek but we don't turn the cheek, and that's why they are like fighting people. Or I don't want to talk too much about that podcast, but like there's examples of us as Christians where we're even omitting certain things because it doesn't, like, whether it's a conversation of how we should view refugees or conversations of how we should view a number of different things that make us go against, whether it's our political or specific worldview. We often try to omit the truths of Scripture to fit our own kind of narrative, and that's exactly what T'Chaka was doing. He was omitting a reality to fit his narrative, and that like corrupted people and like ruined people because of that.
I think we all as humans actually fall guilty of just omitting things about ourselves. We have blind spots among ourselves, or we don't realize how messed up we are, truly, within ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to play the counter to this. I think one way that T'Challa is not a messianic figure is actually how he vehemently disagrees with his father's will. Which I think is, now, in this, is T'Challa's dad wrong? Yes. Like, let's be clear. But I think that that's actually something where we have to be clear. Like, Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane did voice his opinion on, is there any other way that we can save people besides me dying on the cross? Like, he voiced that.
I don't know. Here's what I'm saying. Like, if truly, like, down the line, like, according to Romans, like, Jesus is the next Adam. Like, his father Adam, like, he's looking at what Adam did and the wrongs that Adam did and saying, you're wrong. I'm going to choose a different way.
We're really going down the weeds now. This is probably the most, let's go for it we've had in a long time.
Said also create like a weird Black Panther trinity where T'Challa is the father, T'Challa is the son, and then the herb is the Holy Spirit.
I'm not saying I'm going there, all right? It's a divine mystery for a reason.
I put in my notes that the herb was like the Holy Spirit.
This is like we're stretching it and bordering heresy.
This is why I have to be very careful.
No, okay, be careful. There is evidence. Okay.
No, but the reason I say
that's good. I love
it is good. But I think the reason I say that though is like what I'm trying to get at is when we watch these things and we say, hey, he's like a messianic figure. We have to be careful. T'Challa is not the Messiah. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's like we have to be careful because even though there are some things that's showing glimpses of, it's showing the glory maybe of what the Messiah is supposed to be, he's still not it. And this is why it's so important for us as Christ followers to make sure that we're spending time with the real Jesus and not just looking at the world and saying, I'm going to get my truth from movies, whether it's Marvel or you name the show. And yes, I'm going to include Star Wars in that, Jacob, just for you, all right? We don't take truths from that and go, this is what universally is true. No, all of those, like you said, are borrowing from another redemptive story already. So let's go to the original author. Let's go to the original Messiah. Now, are there truths that we can use? Yes. You guys have used them in sermons. I have not. I'm just going to say that out loud. There's a joke between us that we're the Marvel guys, but I have to be very clear. Not once have I ever on stage mentioned Marvel.
And he's a coward.
Come on, this is you coming out right here.
No,
I
might be in Epikos, but I am not preaching in a sermon. I did that this morning 3 times. I think it's just really important, especially like as I've been studying Colossians and stuff, where he talks so much about when you spend time with the real Jesus, you can tell what the fake is.
Yep.
And so I think when we watch these things, while it's easy to pull out the truths, we also need to at times pull out what is not true about this.
I agree.
Like what is the fake in this? Because I think the world would look at T'Challa, and let me be very clear, with Black Panther 2 coming around the corner, they're going to honor T'Challa like he is a fallen Messiah. Like, we already know that, right? They've already talked about that. We've seen that in the trailers. The first trailer was entire homage to Chadwick Boseman. Rightfully so as an actor, right? Incredible, great. But we have to be careful. He's not Jesus. And so that's why, are we spending time with the real Jesus? Are we knowing him? Are we making sure we can recognize what parts of this movie are real when it's coming to that and which parts are not? I don't know.
Yeah, we have to let the Bible tell us who Jesus is and not the world tell us who Jesus is.
Yeah. That's good. Just in kind of closing out this conversation about like Messiah figure and seeing Killmonger, T'Challa, these two like kind of how their approaches. And obviously I think a conversation that we cannot ignore is the fact that like they're all trying to like, I feel like Killmonger is really driven by hatred and his desire for justice. And his desire for justice is definitely rooted in revenge and trying to attack Whereas T'Challa is coming at it from a desire of trying to give of what Wakanda has to the world. And you mentioned it already, Frank, about this idea that T'Challa is kind of portrayed as like a Martin Luther King figure, whereas Killmonger is portrayed more as like Malcolm X kind of figure. What are your guys' opinion on like a biblical view of justice? We see these two ways portrayed in this film that are with the world. You know, these are the two ways of the world. What does the gospel have to say to that? Whether upholding one of those views, or is there a third way? What do you guys think about that idea? No one's going to touch this question.
I think it's a good question, and I'll be honest, I haven't had a ton of time to like. A lot of times when we try to dive into these things on the podcast, we want to spend time beforehand really understanding it. So when we come to it, we're not coming with half-baked thoughts. So this is a half-baked thought. Let me start there.
Nice.
But the first thing that comes to my mind is justice is mine, says the Lord. Right? Justice is mine. I think we have to start there. And I think that there is different dynamics of justice, right? I mean, there's things we could talk about social justice. We could talk about wanting to free people with justice. There's all sorts of different dynamics. So I think that there is, what's hard is like when I'm looking at the movie and I'm thinking through, this is me verbally processing. So correct me or jump in as you guys feel ready. I think you see them wanting to they want one of two things. They either want to make their nation great or they want to see another nation fall. And I think one of the things that I was thinking about, the justice actually is at the very end when T'Challa looks at his people and says, I don't want my people to just be confined to the people in this dome. I want my people to grow. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes and take on, as he says, when we bring in refugees, we bring on refugees' problems. T'Challa, when he did that, what did he do? He bought the very building where Killmonger's dad died. He's going to take on a lot of stuff with that. And I think the justice is actually seeing, going, how can I be a part of the restoration? Yeah. I think that's where justice can be found, is like that. And I think that's actually what the justice of God is, right? It's him coming in and saying, something is wrong. Sin has a price to it, and I'm going to do everything I can to redeem it or to make it the way it's supposed to. And so the justice is something paying the price that it demanded. There's my half-baked thought. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think a biblical view of justice isn't just like wrong people or bad people getting their due. It's more of like bringing fullness and completeness. I even think like Jesus healing the sick was a form of justice, and Jesus helping the needy is a form of justice. And so when we think of like Micah 6:8 to do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly with our God, I think we have such an American justice system of like justice where like when we think of the word justice, it means like bad people should go to jail and good people should be like venerated.
Judge Judy on NBC.
Sure. But like justice is very much of like I think of like churches that wipe out school lunch debts in whole counties and stuff like that. Like that's a form of justice. When a small group comes alongside, and I think of the small group my mom was in when I was in middle school, and my mom didn't have a lot of money, and the small group came together to make sure I had Christmas gifts. Like that's a form of justice. And so I think that like whenever we talk about justice in this movie, I think them going to Oakland and buying those buildings is not just like justice being served because the dad wronged his brother, but like the justice being served of in an impoverished community. Now those kids have a chance, right? Those kids have an opportunity that weren't given to them, right? And so I think that like, I kind of like forgot what your question was.
Well, it reminds me of the idea of like Jesus he's a peacemaker.
Yeah.
Like a lot of forms of justice in our society are peacekeeping. Which is us forcing people and bending them to our will, whereas Jesus instead takes a stance of coming into a place and being a peaceful, calming presence. And his presence actually brings life into those situations. Yeah. And I'm reminded of the conversation in this Black Panther movie with this idea that it's when Chadwick comes back from the dead and he's talking with his dad. And he tells him, you're wrong. Like, you should have taken that kid and brought him home. Like, you should have leaned in. That's justice, right? That's stepping into a situation rife with conflict, doing the hard thing and saying, I'm going to care for and love this child because I just killed his father, right? Like, that's the idea of just like stepping into a situation as a peacemaker, not just a peacekeeper.
Well, and I think, I may be simplifying this, but I think sometimes a lot of times justice comes down to, are we loving others, right? It's like the biggest thing, right? we are in this world to serve others, as Jesus came into the world to serve others and to serve us. So I think a lot of what is going on in this world has to do with, having ourselves like take a back seat for a second and thinking about your fellow neighbor and what you can do to help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Well, you guys ready to open up a time of Q&A for our audience here? Do you guys have, what's up?
Do you guys even know that you were going to be asked to do Q&A?
Is your mic even on? Hey, do you guys have any Q&A? You guys have any questions? Anybody, if you have a question, raise your hand.
Will's
and we
got
have a microphone.
Will's got a mic.
About the
he'll
movie,
come find you.
about Marvel, about where he got his hat. What do you want to know? We'll answer those questions.
Thank you.
What's your guys' favorite Marvel movie?
That's a great question. This is one that we could spend the next way too long on. I think there's two ways to go about this. So there's favorite in terms of best, like our rankings.
Infinity War is the best one.
Yeah. What? Which one?
Infinity
War is the best.
Infinity War is mine too. So
it depends on which one I saw last, Infinity War or Endgame. As to quote one person, Infinity War is the most consistently great. Endgame has the higher highs and lower lows. So it's like 1A and 1B. However, that's not my favorite. If I'm like, Infinity War's on, I'm like, cool, I might not watch it. If Doctor Strange is on, I'm sitting down and grabbing the popcorn and I'm gonna finish that movie. Like that's one of my favorites, period. And that's from like personal watchability. That's not from what is the best movie.
Tommy is into witchcraft. What's
Wow.
your favorite movie?
This is recorded, Frank. I like my job. I love Jesus. That's not true.
So, fun fact, I used to really hate superhero movies. And then I married this guy, and that had to change. But he's taught me like a lot about Marvel and doing my own research and like getting to fall in love with the characters and the storyline and like, oh, this is more than just like the good guy always winning, which I thought was super boring. But yeah, I think that I love movies that are the super high and the low lows because I feel like that's most reflective of real life. So Infinity War, but I also love Doctor Strange. But honestly, Black Panther is like tied for me because I love heritage, I love culture. Like this just like hits this core with me and like with the music, my music background and other things like culturally coming from, a different culture. It's just, and also I lost my father to cancer and knowing someone like this actor, just, I don't know, it holds so much meaning to me.
Yeah, Spider-Man's my favorite character. Spider-Man No Way Home, Chef's Kiss, such a good movie.
Which one, the first, second, or third, or fourth release of it?
Actually, the last release with the extended cut. So if you can watch the extended cut, it's like 10 more minutes of school scenes. It's so good. Infinity War and Endgame are 1 and 2. Infinity War is excellent. In terms of like an actual movie, it's excellent. But Endgame, I would say once a month, I turn on Disney Plus and I go to the last third act from the part where like Thor's like, of Endgame, and Thor's like, he's just sitting there. And he's like, let's go talk to him. From that scene to the part where Iron Man snaps, dude, I'm balling, bro. Like I want to fight someone. Like I get so much energy. Like it's such everything about that whole scene. When Spider-Man comes in, when Black Panther comes in, everything about that last third act of Endgame is energy, bro. I watched that before I preach a sermon. So let's go!
If you come here and preach and he's amped up, go, he watched Endgame again.
Yeah, Endgame is my
and one of the crazy parts about Infinity War that makes it so good is they make the protagonist Thanos. Now, he's not the good guy, But that's the person that is being chased the whole time.
Yeah, do you understand that? Like, that's bananas. The main character of Infinity War is Thanos. Like, he's the protagonist in that movie. If you think about it, when you think about the story beat for beat, it's a story of him getting what he wants, what he needs, and then winning at the end. That's why, like, I don't know, dude.
So it makes that movie so great is because...
Was it 2018 when it came out?
Yeah.
When that movie, if you saw that movie in theaters, you walked out with clinical depression.
Oh, my wife was so mad.
Oh.
Jenny was so mad. She was like, what?
It was 3 a.m. in the morning,
rough.
it was 3 a.m. in the morning when I walked out of the theater watching that, and I was so exhausted, and I'm with two friends that were pastors, and one of them goes to me, what the, and I can't finish the sentence what he said, because he was like, what just happened? And I was like, I don't know. Please let me go home and go to bed. And I laid in bed at 4 o'clock going, I can't sleep. Where is everybody? What happened? I didn't even have the word for blipped. And I'm like, they disintegrated. Like, there's no other word for it.
Put it this way. The last time I felt that feeling after a movie
Was Left Behind.
Close.
Was it The Passion?
The Passion of the Christ. I walked out Passion of the Christ and was like, that was so difficult. That was so hard to watch. That's what Infinity War
And then to wait a whole year after Infinity War, not the Passion of Christ. We had 3 days.
I know.
Through a whole year after Infinity War.
And then you got like a new movie between
Kids these days will never
Ant-Man.
understand what it was like to have to wait.
The only time I've seen my husband cry was when Spider-Man died. And
Oh.
like, that's the only time.
Didn't cry. I would question your
He didn't even
salvation
cry at our
that
wedding.
point. That was crazy.
Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good.
Dude. I got being
That was rough.
That was so hard.
All right, we do have to ask Jacob this. What's your favorite? And Batman's not the answer.
Oh,
Jacob.
man, are you sure?
Return of the Jedi, right? That's your favorite movie?
Return of the Jedi. Empire Strikes Back. No, yeah, I like Infinity War is definitely my favorite movie. And you guys invited me onto the podcast to talk about Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier. I think that's like one of my favorite, most well done movies. It's got the spy thriller vibe to it. Action is phenomenal. There's the scene, the car chase in that where they meet Winter Soldier and Bucky reveals himself. Like, that's such a beautifully done action scene. So I love that movie.
And the music
very
for
much.
Winter Soldier is just screech, which is the same screech audio from one of his previous ones.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same scream that Bucky has when he's falling off of the train in the first Captain America. They take that voice and synthesize it, and that's the eerie screeching sound.
Every time you see Winter Soldier, it's
Soldier,
actually Bucky screaming,
Yeah.
but you don't realize that. This is the level of nerd that
This
we
is the
are.
level
This is
of nerd.
so much fun.
Is there any other questions out there? Any other questions that we can answer? This is your opportunity to talk back to the podcast. This is great. Okay, we got one over here. This is great podcasting right here.
What one Marvel movie would you say best exemplifies the gospel?
Best exemplifies the gospel?
To me, it is Falcon, or it is Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier. I just think the self-sacrifice of Cap being willing to risk his own life to save his friend Bucky, who is actually his enemy. I feel like that definitely encapsulates the gospel of how I was once an enemy, that Jesus gave down and laid his life down to save me and to give all for me.
I may go back one more before that in the first Captain America. Because I think you're right, it is laying down the life, but the first one, he lays down his life by taking a tesseract into the ice, and he gives up his life for everybody, not just one. So I think that he leaves the 99 for the one. I think we can 100% go there. But I could see that. I think what's hard in this question is you have to ask which aspect of the gospel are you talking about? Because there is definitely the giving up of your life, the messianic dying part, but there's also part of the gospel is just entering a new family. So which one of those is the best way to describe what it means to be a part of a new family? I might argue that could be Miss Marvel, actually. And what does it mean to be family? You could see that dynamic. You could also talk about in the gospel, what does it mean to have a debt forgiven, right? So you could talk about, what dynamic? I think it's a great question, but it's even in that, which part of the gospel do you want to dive into specifically while we're talking about Christ's sacrifice, which is a huge piece of it? There's also so many other dynamics of it to get in there as well. I don't know, what are you thinking, Frank? He's got the list in front of him. We're having to do this off the top of my memory. He's this guy.
You guys want to pick one first? I might get weird, so.
Okay.
What are you going to pick, Moon Knight?
Actually, Deadpool. But.
Yeah, I don't know. You bring up a good point. There's so many different parts of the gospel, but I don't know. I haven't seen Thor Ragnarok, but there's something about kind of Thor losing his power. I mean, obviously, Jesus voluntarily gives up.
I mean, he says, what's this place called? Asgard? Asgard is a people, not a place.
Yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful.
We can rebuild. Oh, never mind. Right at the very end when the planet blows up.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it more. Just because, I haven't watched Marvel as many times as
You've
you
probably
guys
seen
have.
every movie once.
I've seen every movie once for sure, but I think looking at it from the lens of the gospel, at the moment I'm still thinking, Black Panther or Captain America. I feel like the first one. So.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought, when you said the Winter Soldier one, I was like, oh, that's a good one because he's literally willing to lay down his life for someone who's trying to hurt him, and that's a really good picture. My first thought was the first Captain America where he lays on the ice. But, I mean, if you're talking about Christ figures, I think Captain America is a great Christ figure, even though, he's also like a great picture of, white Christian nationalism. that's neither here nor there. But he...
that's a can of worms.
And you're not wrong.
Here's the scene, I think, if we can go to Endgame. The scene where everyone's defeated. Right before the blip back, he stands up, he tightens up his broken shield, and he's, you can feel he's going to say the line, I can do this all day, right? He was ready to die. He was like, I am going to keep going until I die. And I think to me, that was a sign of how I would see Jesus was willing to do everything, more than we could even demand or ask of him for our sake. And I think that's what Cap was willing to do for his friends. And I thought, when I see that, that's one of the most emotional scenes where he tightens his shield, and he's already defeated. Thanos is way too strong, and he's ready to die for it. I thought that was, oh my goodness, Iron Man in that movie. He literally did it.
I was literally about to.
He literally did it. Oh my goodness. I mean, he literally.
Captain America was ready to die. He had everything go. Iron Man died.
You're right. There's only one way. And he's like, okay, I guess dude, Tony. I mean, he's I think the problem with him is he's an imperfect character. He's very selfish, 99% of the films that he was in, but that last scene where he sacrificed, he knew he was going to die by doing that.
People always ask us, what's it like to hang out with you guys? You're seeing it. Literally, this is not this exact conversation.
Ashley's at our lunch tables on Tuesday. People leave our tables because when we start talking about Marvel, so we have a rule. We don't talk about.
There's a person literally sit down and go, can I sit here and not talk about Marvel today? And I'm like, yes, Emily, you can. So.
Do you call each other in the middle of the night saying, I had this new thought?
We do have group texts. We're you see this meme?
It may or may not be called the Nerdy Campus Pastors, but it's okay. But
yeah.
Any other questions? We can take one more. All right. They're just hey, end this show. End it right now. Let's close out our night by, let's just think a little bit in anticipation of Wakanda Forever. We'll try to make this quick. In theaters, November 11th. Let's be real. This is the whole reason why we showed Black Panther tonight is in preparation for Wakanda Forever coming to us next month. So what are you most looking forward to or predicting will happen in the upcoming Wakanda Forever film? I'm going to start with far left, Eric.
I'm most excited to see Namor. That's his name, right? He has so many different connections with so many other heroes. He has connection with Fantastic Four, X-Men, Doctor Doom, obviously. So, you already know X-Men is gonna be part of the MCU in some form or fashion. So, I might be setting my expectation too high on that, but.
Any guy who has wings on his ankles, I'm excited to see.
Oh, yeah.
That sounded weird. In the movie, Namor has wings on his ankles, so I'm excited to see how they do that. But anyways.
I'm really excited about them bringing in Aztec culture, really excited for Latino to represent. Anytime they bring in another character to represent a culture, it's just, I get so pumped for that. I'm excited for the music because what that might sound like and bringing in the culture like they did with Black Panther, the possibilities, I just can't wait to hear what that's going to sound like. I have this thought that I've been toying with, I think, what if, T'Challa ended up having a son before he died, or they threw that in there, maybe until then, like his sister's gonna be the Black Panther until the child's old enough. I don't know. That's like my little theory in my head. I have no idea.
That's a prediction.
Theory time.
I like that. That's really good. I will say that Marvel is not above criticism. There's some things that Marvel does wrong or not great. But one thing that I feel like they've done consistently good is when they are entering into some sort of specific ethnic or national representation of something, they kind of kill it. Like Shang-Chi is in my top 10 because I thought Shang-Chi was such a good movie and like immersing me into a world that I probably don't have a lot of like knowledge on, and like I loved it. And the fact that like other like Asian Americans felt seen and represented in that film like was really, really cool. Black Panther did something similar. Miss Marvel did something similar with Pakistani folks. And like, so, me being the resident Hispanic here, like I'm Cuban, and the one movie that I like, it's not even on my ranking because it's like above and beyond everything else is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like Miles Morales, like is an example to me of like if I could like probably like project onto myself of what I was like or wish I was like in high school, it's Miles Morales. Like he, half black, half Puerto Rican. Like that is kind of a world I was like living in, and I was like that I feel so seen, and I'm like 35. Like this kid's like 15. He's like, I feel so represented. There's a doll that looks like me, right? No, but I think that like Namor is. He's one of the oldest Marvel characters. He predates Aquaman. If you're wondering why him and Aquaman look so similar, and like I think there's so much there, and like you said, the connections to Doctor Doom, connections to like Secret Wars is a movie that's coming up. I have the whole Secret Wars comic set. I've read it, and it's like it's just there's so much that can be set up just from this movie. Yep. And I guess if I could just summarize one thing, I'm looking forward. The last two movies are like solid Bs, like Thor: Love and Thunder and Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness. Like I give it a B rating. Like it's not a bad movie. It's a pretty good movie.
That's generous.
But they were very jokey. They're very like silly movies, right? Like over the top silliness. I'm looking forward. Like we just saw Black Panther. Like it was a fairly sincere film, and like I'm looking forward to another sincere Marvel like product. And I think that's what Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to be.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts. One of them. This is the last movie for Phase 4, right? So if you don't know, like there's 4 phases in Marvel. This is the 4th one. Phase 3 ended with Endgame. Phase 4 is all about dealing with the consequences of Endgame. So that's why you see a lot of emotional turmoil. You're seeing people dealing with like Spider-Man and No Way Home. They're setting up the next thing. So Phase 4 is like a setup. Somebody said, and I thought this was good, view Phase 4 like Phase 1. You're introducing to everything's new again. And so I think that helps to know like this is almost like the bookend. The only other thing that's left is the holiday Christmas special with Guardians of the Galaxy, which if you don't know anything about like their holiday specials, Werewolf by Night, awesome. It's on Disney Plus, 1 hour long. It's like a black and white monster movie, a little bit of gore, but like the story's great. It's like in its own universe, but not. Anyways, that's a whole sidetrack. But I say that because I'm interested to see how they wrap up Phase 4. I'm a little... I don't know what the right word other than say. I'm concerned / curious how they handle Boseman's death. Mm-hmm. I'm worried they could go over the top or not go far enough. And in either way, I think it has the potential to ruin the film, not make the film, if that makes sense. If they start off with his death and it's not done in the right way, and I don't know what that is, I think the whole rest of the movie has a bad taste in your mouth no matter what.
I told Eric this earlier. Trust Ryan Coogler.
Yeah.
He's not going to steer it. Ryan Coogler. Did you just watch that movie?
Oh, I know.
It's so good. Like, I'm going to trust Ryan with this next movie.
I'm not concerned at all.
I'm not concerned.
I know. That's why I said concerned / interested. I'm not sure which of those, but it's in there.
Ryan Coogler's the director, in case you didn't know.
This is my theory. You said son. I think there's going to be more than one Black Panther that shows up. So like,
I do too.
I don't think that, I think the powers are going to switch between multiple characters. One of the things in Black Panther is it's kind of like Captain America, where, spoiler alert, Captain America, like the shield has been passed on to somebody, to Falcon. And in the same way, Black Panther in the comics, that persona, those abilities got passed on to different people within Wakanda. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know if it'll happen here. I want to see Michael B. Jordan come back. Like, I think that either in Secret Wars or in Kang Dynasty, we're going to either see another multiverse of it, or you're going to see him come back, and there's going to be some sort of fight of some kind there. I don't know. Maybe that's just me hoping, because I love Killmonger, the character, and Michael B. Jordan as an actor.
They're going to
But,
bring back Killmonger, and then he's going to die right away.
Hey.
And then Siri's going to take up the mantle. That's my big theory. But it's going to be wrong. So that'd be fun.
I mean, it could be a big what if movie, but
there you
season
go.
2 coming out next year. Yep. What if season 2?
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Audience, why don't you give it up for our panel? Thank them for... Thank you so much, and thank you all for giving us a place for our nerdum to thrive and flourish here. Guys, how can we find you? This is for Tommy and Frank. How can we find you, your podcast? Give us a plug.
At The Marvelous Gospel or themarvelousgospel.com. We have stickers, by the way. Since you're in here on the table with all my toys from my house, there's a bunch of Marvelous Gospel stickers. Please feel free to take one, put it on your bottles.
The stickers, not the toys.
Yeah,
the stickers.
the toys.
Those are the giveaways. Yeah, and follow us on there. And one of the things too, we say this quite a bit. We post a lot of stuff on Instagram and stuff. Feel free, if you watch a movie and you have questions, please write us. One of the things that we look forward to is actually seeing, what do you guys see? Like, the reason we're doing this is not just because we love Marvel and want to talk about it, although that's a part of it. The bigger reason is we want to help us grow in understanding more about who Christ is. And so if you see things or you're diving in it, and then be willing to use this in your conversations as well. So yeah.
Right now, the biggest way people are using us is parents asking us, can I take my 12-year-old to go see Thor Love and Thunder? And I'm like,
no.
It's a weird conversation about orgies. I don't know if you can take your 12-year-old there. It's kind of weird. It's really weird.
That word's used many times by Russell Crowe with a terrible
But go watch
accent.
Miss Marvel. That's super PG. It's for,
not She-Hulk.
Yeah.
Eric and Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. Did you want to throw out your social media handles at all or anything like that? You don't have to, because that's...
to be honest, I don't even remember what mine is, but
Mine is Jake, a.k.a. Batman. That's my Twitter handle, so look me up on Twitter. But Tommy, Frank, why don't you close us off? I have the script down for
We
you.
will see you next time. And as you watch these amazing movies, please don't forget to watch, or please don't forget to look for.
No.
Wow.
Can we let's try this one again?
Rewind.
This we've been editing for.
This is where we like edit it out. And we're gonna take.
We've actually had this happen a couple times. We recorded, like, we'll get to the end and he'll start it, and I'll be like, nope, start over.
All right, here we go.
I wrote it down for you.
We will see you next time. And as you watch these amazing movies, remember not to miss
The Marvelous Gospel.
See ya. Thank you.